In the heat of the Vietnam War on March 16, 1968, a young U.S. Army officer, William Laws Calley Jr., led his platoon into the small South Vietnamese hamlet of My Lai. What happened next would become one of the darkest chapters in American military history. This is the story of the man at the center of it all, a man whose name became synonymous with horror and controversy, William Calley. Born in Miami, Florida in 1943, Calley's early years were unremarkable. After dropping out of college and working a string of low-level jobs, he found himself in the Army, desperate for a sense of direction. But even in the military, he struggled, with his superiors labeling him as merely average and, at times, incompetent. Still, in 1967, he graduated from Officer Candidate School and was sent to Vietnam as a second lieutenant. On that fateful day in My Lai, Calley's platoon encountered no enemy combatants. Instead, they unleashed hell on unarmed civilians, old men, women, children, and infants. They were gunned down, stabbed with bayonets, and blown apart by grenades. In a matter of hours, hundreds were dead. The official U.S. count stood at 347, but the Vietnamese memorial lists 504 victims, with entire families wiped out. Calley didn't just allow this carnage, he led it. The U.S. Army initially tried to cover up the massacre, but the truth eventually surfaced, thanks to the relentless efforts of a former soldier, Ron Ridenour, who had heard the harrowing accounts. In 1970, Calley was charged with the murder of 22 villagers. The trial was explosive, revealing that Calley had ordered his men to kill everyone in the village, even as they faced no immediate threat. Despite overwhelming evidence, Calley's defense claimed he was following orders from his superior, Captain Ernest Medina. Medina denied giving any such orders, and in his own trial was acquitted. Calley, however, was convicted, and on March 31, 1971, he was sentenced to life in prison. The American public was divided. Many saw Calley as a scapegoat, a low-ranking officer paying the price for the failures of higher-ups and the horrors of an unwinnable war. Governors across the country called for clemency, and President Richard Nixon, bowing to public pressure, ordered Calley's release from prison just 3 days after his conviction. Calley's sentence was eventually reduced, and he spent only 3 years under house arrest. Calley's life after the trial was a far cry from the battlefield. He married, had a son, and lived a quiet life, working in his father-in-law's jewelry store. But the shadow of My Lai never lifted. In 2009, over 4 decades after the massacre, Calley publicly apologized for his actions, expressing remorse for the lives lost. But for many, it was too little, too late. William Calley passed away in 2024, his death barely noticed by the public. A man who once stood at the center of one of the most infamous events of the 20th century had quietly faded into obscurity. His story remains a chilling reminder of the capacity for evil in the fog of war, and the heavy burden of conscience that